Thank you. Good morning. Is everyone okay? Yeah? It's a bit... Yeah, okay. So today I'll talk about battles in our everyday life and what we can do when we're struggling again or when we're feeling rough. And to start, I would like to do a little thought experiment with you, or more like a fictional story I will tell you. So imagine a family, so they're consisting of like the parents, the teenage children, and the teenage children are like at the age where you can leave them alone and you know they won't burn down the house. So the parents are like, okay, we're gonna go away for a week, we need some time together. You've got a list, what you've got to do during the week in order to maintain the household. And on the list it's like stuff like taking out the rubbish or watering the flowers, mopping the kitchen, and all the stuff you basically need to do in your household. Okay, so they're leaving and they're coming back after a week. And then when they come back, they have like the idea in their mind that everything is done, the list is ticked off, they've done everything they've told them. But when they come back, they rather see that the list doesn't really look like what they imagined it to look like. So the children, they did clean the kitchen and they watered the flowers, and they even took out the dog, which is important because it needs to go out before it poops in the kitchen. But yeah, that's basically all they've done, and they forgot all the rest. They didn't do the trash, they didn't do the washing, they didn't clean the bathroom, and the washing is even still wet, smelling in the washing drum. So the parents call the children over and are like, okay, hey, we thought you were mature enough to do it, we trusted you, but clearly we were wrong. So can you explain to us why you didn't do the stuff we told you to do? And so the children say, so yeah, you know, we didn't really realize that we had to do it. So we thought, yeah, it's a list, that's fine, but then we can kind of like pick what we want and what we don't want. And we really prayed about it and really thought about what we're going to do. But yeah, some of the stuff just didn't feel like we had to do it. And I really think that this story kind of like shows us sometimes how we act when God tells us something. So he sometimes tells us something, and then we take it serious, we think about it, but then in the end we still don't do it. So we know that he clearly wants us to do something, but in the end we really don't do it because we kind of like feel like, oh, it's not that important. But he told us to do it, and he even says it in the Bible. And we sometimes don't even have to ask the Lord first what to do, because he, as I said, says it in the Bible. And for example, one thing he says really clearly in the Bible is in Philippians 4, verse 69, and it says, don't be anxious about anything. And personally, me in my everyday life, I do like to be anxious about stuff. And I worry about tomorrow, about what's coming the week. Like thinking about now, like May is really packed, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this. There's so much coming up, and even after today, I'll probably be really tired. But even like thinking, like this morning, I was like, really like thinking like, oh, I don't know how to do this right now. I don't know how to express what I want to say. But do you know what God is telling you to do? He says, just leave it. He says, don't worry about it, and instead he tells us we should pray about it and pray about every situation. So another example he also tells us what to not to do is in Ephesians 4 verse 29, and he says, don't speak ill of each other. I don't know if you know the situation, but especially in our everyday lives, we sometimes still speak ill of each other, even sometimes without realizing it. So like, for example, you're kind of saying, oh, have you heard this person, what they've done? Oh, that's just really awful. I don't know why they did that. How could they? But then when people ask, oh, where did you hear it from? You're kind of like, oh, yeah, someone told me. And then they got told by someone else. So it must be true. And we can basically tell it on because they already told it, other people. And God again says, just don't do it. Just don't speak ill of each other. But instead, speak what's true, speak what's good, and speak also what builds each other up, instead taking each other down. And I think these are like really clear instructions that God gives us. And again, you just have to open up the Bible, read it, and it's literally there on paper or on your phone, depending on what you want to do. And it just helps to understand what God wants from us. But the problem that we know, and not I just know, but we all know, and even Paul knows this problem, is that again and again and again, in like an endless loop, we try to do the good thing, but then we don't end up doing it. I try to set up a task for myself. I try to do it good, but in the end, I don't succeed in realizing it. And sometimes I just don't manage to do it like God wants me to do in my everyday life. But if that's your struggle, I have a good news for you. Paul knew the battle as well, and he fought the battle as well, but still he founded many churches. He was a great man of God, and we can learn a lot from Paul, I think. And another guy who also fought the battles was Barak. I don't know if you know Barak. I didn't know him, to be honest, before that story, before I looked it up. But he's a man in the first part of the Bible, and he appears in a situation of the Bible where Israel has been oppressed for 20 years by a king and his commander Sisera. And in this time of the oppression, after 20 years, the people pled to the Lord and asked him to help them. And the Lord called Barak to help these people, and I will briefly read to you what happens. So Barak was met by the judge of the time, this woman called Deborah, because she knew that Barak had been called by God. And I'll take you into the story. It's in Judges 4:6-16, if you want to read along, and I use the NLT translation, but you can use any translation you want. So one day she sent from Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh, the land of Naphtali. She said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors, to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." Barak told her, "I will go, but only if you go with me." "Very well," she replied, "I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh, and at Kadesh Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 warriors went up with him, and Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite, a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law Hobab, had moved away from the other members of his tribe and pitched his tent by the oak of Sananim near Kadesh. Then Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to the Mount Tabor, and he called for all 900 of his iron chariots and all of his warriors, and they marched to Harosheth Hagoyim, to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Get ready, this is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you." So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. And when Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. And then Barak chased these chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim, killing all of Sisera's warriors, and not a single one was left alive. So you can see this is one of the heroic battles that we can read about Barak. And even a few hundred years later, he is mentioned with all these famous people from the Bible, like Abraham, Moses, or David. And they were all like these brave men from the first part of the Bible, and he was mentioned besides them. And he goes down in history as a hero as well. Although, to be honest, I think he probably quite wet his trousers, and he actually didn't really do first what God told him to do from the very beginning, without doubting or hesitating, because he had doubts and he hesitated. And he also, in the end, he didn't even kill Sisera, but the woman called Jael, who ambushed him, did kill Sisera in the end. But why is Barak then called a hero if he didn't really do anything, didn't really kill anyone? What does it take to become a hero of faith as well? And I think when we think of a hero of faith, or at least when I do sometimes, I kind of like think of like a superhero. You know, like these well-trained with like all their muscles, and they have like all this charisma, and they just, when they like cast a determined glance into the crowd, they get everyone to go into battle with them. And like 50 psalms have been written about them, and now every second Christian boy is named after him. I don't really see that with Barak, or at least I've never met anyone called Barak, but who knows. But yeah, he's still described as a hero of faith. So I think we should take a look at what Barak is actually doing in the story, that what makes him deserve the title of a hero of faith. So it starts like this. Deborah comes up to him. She says like, hey Barak, I have like this clear mission for you. You should go and assemble an army of 10,000 people and go to war against our oppressors. But not only that, she also tells him God will give you the victory. So everything's basically taken care of. He just has to go get the people together and God will care for him. But how does he react? Does he stand up, flex his biceps and is ready, giving a determined look? He doesn't really, to be fair. So instead he hesitates, he thinks about it, and he kind of like takes a step back and like crosses his arms and is like, if you're coming with me, I'm doing it, but if you're not coming with me, I'm not doing it at all. He says, he basically hesitates, but yet he is described as a worthy person of belief. But why do you think he hesitates? Well, it's not really in the text, so it's all what I thought why he hesitates, so we can only speculate. But when I put myself in Barak's shoes, I think, or you as well can quickly think of things why he hesitates in the first part. So the first point could be that he's just likes to be comfortable. So he's like, I'm fine the way I am right now. I don't need to change anything. My life is good. Why should I step out? I'm safe here. No need to be brave and strong. And to be fair, I often know these normal moments in my life where I'm like, oh, I'm really comfortable here. I don't really want to do this. It's out of my comfort zone. But but when I compare this like to God's normal, then it's definitely far from normal, because like God's normal is completely different. But yeah, if I had to change something, then I wouldn't be comfortable anymore, and that kind of pushes me or pushes Barak away from doing it actually. So what I do is I step back and look for an excuse, if I'm honest. But another thing that could bother Barak from not doing it could be fear. It was probably fear in Barak's case. I mean, I would be scared as well, knowing that the enemy had like 900 iron chariots. And as also one chapter later it says that Israel didn't even have a spear or a shield. So they were basically virtually unarmed. And the 900 iron chariots would have just mowed them down. Like they probably didn't even have a single chance at all. So I would definitely be wetting my pants. But maybe it also goes hand in hand with inferiority. So maybe perhaps Barak thought to himself, like, why me? Why did God choose me from all of these people? I have nothing special about me. I'm not really strong. I'm not really famous. What am I capable of? And how should I even do this? Or maybe it was even doubt. I mean, sure, he had Deborah, and she told him, hey, God will give you the victory. But then to believe that actually before seeing it happening, I think is really challenging sometimes. I mean, I don't know about you, but maybe you also doubt sometimes that God is really with you if you can't really see it happening. And maybe you also doubt that he will give you the victory when you can't see the finish line. Or maybe you also doubt your own abilities, like Barak did, or you're afraid that your life will somehow become unpleasant when you step out, take a step of faith. Yeah, definitely all of these feelings might have been going on in Barak's mind in that moment. But I think all of that is really relieving to know, because he hesitates, he doubts, and he might be even afraid, but yet he is called a hero of faith. So it doesn't really disqualify you if you hesitate, if you doubt, from being a hero of faith. And I think also the Bible is really full of these stories like Moses, like Gideon, or Jeremiah, and they were all people who doubted God's power, but they still were people like you and me, and they were called a person of faith, and they're pretty well known in the Bible. And I think we can take them as role models as well, because also how they dealt with the situation and how they overcame the gap between like hearing from God and then actually doing it. So yeah, I think we should take another look at what Barak did in order to overcome all of his feelings. So the first thing he did go and ask Deborah for help. So he says, hey Deborah, I can't do it on my own. I need you. I can't do it otherwise. You need to help me. And I think also that's another relieving message, isn't it? To know that I don't have to do it on my own. I can go and ask someone to help me. But it is often sometimes really difficult to admit that you need help, because he's admitting his weakness and saying, I need help. And I think that also takes courage. Because I also sometimes really find it difficult to ask for help. Because like there's always like this pride of like being like, oh, I did it on my own. I want to do it on my own. I don't need any help. And I think that that's where the story comes in and says, good news about faith is that faith is basically not an individual sport, but you can come together as a Christian. You can come to God. You can ask for help, and you don't have to do it alone. And also the Bible is really clear on that. In Galatians 6, verse 2, it says, share each other's burdens, and this is the way, and in this way obey the law of Christ. So I think that's really relieving to know that you don't have to fight alone, but you can go to other people, share how you feel, and they can help you, and God can help you. And I was allowed myself that experience in my childhood of asking someone for help or asking more people for help. So I'm going to share really short testimony, or the testimony basically, but I will do the longer version in 3 weeks at my baptism, if you want to come along. So basically I grew up Christian, my parents were Christian, I went to church, went to youth group, everything, never was rebellious. And then I was put into hospital, had like a lung infection, was put into a breathing tube. And since then I had like really bad panic attacks, not being able to sleep, thinking I'm dying, not getting enough air. And what I did was I asked my mom to help me to fall asleep. And together we asked God to heal me and help me as well. I also gave my life to Jesus because like one night was really bad. But what I also did, I went to therapy, asked another person to help me, and just like sharing your emotions, sharing my feelings with God, with my family, with just random people, just really helped me to overcome it. And since then I've been pretty much fine. So yeah, I'm really thankful for all this, what happened in my life, just seeing God's power work. So yeah, Barak also called someone for help. He called Deborah and asked for help, and she says, I'm going with you. She says, I will support you in your journey. I will go to war with you. And that gives him basically the courage to get up and go to war. But yet the problems are still here. I mean, he asked for one Deborah, but he didn't ask for like hundreds of iron chariots. He could have done it, but he didn't. He just asked for one person. But Deborah comes to his help. He comes to him, stands on top of the mountain with him, and they look down with all their unarmed companions, and they look at this military superiority. And then Barak gets anxious again. I mean, I can't blame him. And he's once again overwhelmed with all this fear, all these feelings, all his emotions. And he probably gets scared and thinks to himself, like, what have I done? Why am I up here? Why did I say yes to this? What have I let myself in for? I would rather go back to safety. And I don't know, maybe you also know these moments in your life where you've taken the step of faith, where you came out of your comfort zone, and then you kind of like have second thoughts and you're kind of like regretting it. You're kind of like, oh, what did I do? I can't cope with it. And I also had like a bit of second thoughts on my way to the airport last year when I came here. I was like, why am I sitting in this car? What am I doing? I should have just stayed at home that year and just relaxed. But now I'm like literally on the way to another country, new people, everything. But it was, unnecessary thoughts because everything went out fine. I haven't been homesick since I've been here, which is really great. So yeah, that's basically where Deborah comes into Barak's life, and she reminds him of like this literally match deciding truth in the truest sense of word. She says, hasn't the Lord gone out before you? Didn't he promise you that? And it reminds Barak of what God has told him, that God told him he would bring the victory for him no matter what. And that gives him the strength to get up and to realize that, hey, if the Lord has gone out before me, then I can do it. So Barak goes off and goes into battle, and surprise, he wins. So Barak, he went down from Mount Tabor, and he also becomes active. He leaves his comfort zone because he knows that God is with him, and he knows who is fighting for him and with him. So that's what happens. the Lord frightened the army, and then we read a chapter later how he does it. So he just lets a downpour come, and the whole battlefield is flooded, and everything is full of mud, so the chariots get stuck. And just reading that, it's like God just does it. He's like this, and then a downpour comes, and then all the chariots get stuck. And he basically defeats like a whole army of like people with weapons and everything. And that's what I find really cool about the story, just seeing how God like promised you something, and he actually does it. He doesn't let you down, and he even like demonstrates all his power as well. So yeah, God doesn't or won't let you hanging. If you can't do it on your own, you can always count on God, because God won't let you down. And I think that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves of, that we are not fighting alone, no matter when. And I think that becomes the clearest when he sends down Jesus Christ himself. He could have just stayed up in heaven in his comfort zone, looking down, being like, oh yeah, I'm comfortable up here, let them do their stuff. But he didn't do it. He left his comfort zone. He came to earth, and he proved to us that he wouldn't let us down, and that he won't let us alone in our struggles. And he said, I will not leave you hanging, but rather I will let myself hang on the cross for you. And that's the place he has borne all the failures and all the guilt. So we should always bear in mind that God won't leave us hanging, but is always there to support us. And perhaps you may have never asked God for help, because you've simply done it yourself up to now. And I know it's hard to admit that you need help, or hard to ask for help. But I think what you can do today is you can just use the moment now and just simply say, like, Jesus, I've done all of this on my own so far, but from now on I want to step out in faith. I want to ask you for help. I want to no longer fight on my own, but I rather want you to fight by myself and fight for me with your strength, because I think that's definitely the easiest way out, but also there will be a good outcome in the end. I would like to pray to finish. Jesus, thank you that we're allowed to come to you, and that we are allowed to tell you our weaknesses, even though you know them already. I want to thank you that you meet us in our weaknesses, and that you love us as well. And I want to now lay down everything that prevents me from asking you for help, because I know you love me and that you will not let me fall. So I lay down all my pride and all my fear and everything that I have made bigger than you. And I ask for forgiveness, and thank you that you've died and rose again, and that you've taken this upon yourself, that now nothing stands between us, and that you are always there to help us, and that we know you, we can count on you. In Jesus' name, amen.